Before we begin, I would like to introduce to you Amber Robertson. She's going to come to the podium. She's a student here from Urbana, Ohio, and she's an animal science and pre-vet major. She is also a legacy student, I found out this morning. Her father came here, ran track, and graduated in 1996, huh? Very good. I'm sure he was really proud when you decided to come here. Very good. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. Like you said, my name is Amber Robeson, and I'm a senior pre-vet animal science major with a double minor in chemistry and biology. It's been an honor to be here with you guys. For a quick backstory on myself and my relationship with the university, like you said, my dad was a UF alum, and he graduated here in 1996. And I started my career here my junior year of high school, where I took College Credit Plus courses through the university, which allowed me to complete 58 credit hours, which is roughly 2 years before I graduated high school. Now I'm able to graduate a year early, so I'll be graduating this spring, marking the end of my third year. I've just applied to veterinary school, where I hope to continue to earn my doctorate of veterinary medicine and make a difference in the world. On campus, I'm very involved with campus ministries, where I'm the Revive Worship Band leader, leader of the Christian Veterinary Mission, and previously a girls' Bible group leader. I also am involved in DTA, the Agricultural Honor Society, Tri Beta, Biological Honor Society, and Mortarboard National Honor Society, and I'm also on the Findlay Club women's soccer team. And I'm also a part of a research group under Dr. Zulu, where we are currently researching HeLa cells and how they are affected by a drug that we developed that could potentially kill cancer cells. Overall, the University of Findlay has given me opportunities and experiences that have helped me become a well-rounded individual, and I could never imagine myself being anywhere else. Today, as we gather to learn from U.S. Army Major General John Harris, who will speak to us on a topic of leadership in challenging times, we are reminded of the importance of leadership and resilience. Before we begin, let's take a moment to pause and pray. Heavenly Father, we come before you with grateful hearts, thankful for the opportunity to gather here in the spirit of learning, leadership, and unity. Today, as we prepare to hear from Major General John Harris, we ask for your presence among us. Grant us open minds to absorb the knowledge shared and open hearts to understand the deeper lessons of courage and commitment that come with leadership. May the words spoken today inspire and challenge us to lead with integrity, compassion, and wisdom. Bless Major General Harris that he may speak with clarity and conviction. Give him strength and peace as he shares his insights with us. Surround him with your grace as he leads and serves with dedication and honor. Guide us to reflect on the importance of serving others, standing firm in our beliefs, and making decisions that promote the greater good. Help us to be resilient leaders in our commitments, willing to act justly, love mercy, and walk humbly in your sight. We thank you for this time together and the wisdom that will be shared. In your holy name we pray. Amen.
Thank you, Amber. As you might expect, our distinguished speaker today, U.S. Army Major General John C. Harris, Jr., is a man with a mission. Here at the University of Findlay, we are also clearly centered on a mission to prepare our students for meaningful lives and productive careers. You can see our mission boldly proclaimed on the orange wall right outside of this auditorium. Our faculty and staff put that mission into practice every day as we work together to provide students with academic excellence, transformative experiences, and supportive community. Students recognize the University of Findlay offers something special. That is one reason why our enrollment remains strong. UF welcomed 2,200 undergraduate students and 980 graduate students this fall. Our College of Business, College of Health Professions, and College of Pharmacy have all have more undergraduate students this year than they did in 2022 or 2023. We offer more than 80 academic programs. They are closely aligned with the needs of our employers. We are preparing UF graduates to excel in the workplace here in Findlay, across Ohio, and around the globe. National publications have taken note of our commitment to our students, and UF is proud to have earned several top rankings. The university is listed among the best Midwestern colleges by the Princeton Review for 2025, and we were recently notified that UF has been named among the best online colleges in Ohio by Online U, a research and publishing firm. As we carry out our mission, the university also works closely with many community and business partners. We could not achieve our mission without you, and we thank you for your support, helping our students to achieve their educational dreams. And now, we are going to hear more about leadership and mission. I would like to welcome to the podium Dr. Marcia Latta, our Senior Philanthropic Advisor, and she will guide this morning's discussions.
Good morning. I'm not Marcia Latta. Thank you so much for, number one, coming out this morning. And I have to say, Amber, I was so inspired by your remarks. And I want you to know that I was feeling pretty good about myself until you went through your resume. I got tired just listening to all the things that you do. And I was actually, it's like a kick in the head when you said that your father graduated in 1996. My goodness, nothing like making a guy feel old. But it's also the first time in all my years as a general officer that the person who introduced me has prayed for me. You know, as I was coming up this morning on the Black Hawk and watching the sunrise, literally watching the sunrise from the backseat of the Black Hawk, I knew this was going to be a great day. And you made it special for me, so thank you for that. As was mentioned, I'm Major General John Harris. I serve as the 83rd Adjutant General. That position is a constitutional position. It is not only a member of Governor DeWine's cabinet and his advisor on military issues. I'm the senior military advisor here in the Ohio National Guard, and I'm the commanding general of Ohio's National Guard. Our National Guard is about 16,000 young men and women, about 10,000 in our Army National Guard, about 5,000 in our Air National Guard. Our Air National Guard consists of 5 bases arrayed around the state. You're probably most familiar with the Toledo unit, our F-16 unit. We are very fortunate in Ohio. We have the 7th largest National Guard in the nation. Every state in the nation has a National Guard. Not only that, but 3 territories, Guam, Virgin Islands, and Puerto Rico, and then the District of Columbia. So there are actually 54 National Guards, and Ohio's happens to be the 7th largest. We have the 2nd largest Air Guard, and the 5th largest Army National Guard. We're also fortunate because we have a great force mix, what we call a force mix. So we have, in our Army Guard, we have combat formations, we have sustainment formations, and we have combat support formations. Our Air Guard, as I mentioned, we have an F-16 wing right here in Toledo, well, just north of here in Toledo. We have a KC-135 aerial refueling wing in Columbus. In Mansfield, we're converting from a C-130, which is an inter-theater transport aircraft, converting from that to a cybersecurity wing. Mansfield will be the only wing of its type in the nation that will do what's called cyber-enabled air superiority, an incredible mission that will really give us a competitive advantage, a strategic advantage on the modern battlefield. I'll talk about that here in just a second. And our 4th Air Wing is in Springfield, Ohio. And those folks, not only they're an intel wing, but they are also a unmanned aerial systems wing, and they fly Reapers. Their aircraft are around the world generally, launched and recovered in places around the world, but they operate those aircraft from Springfield, Ohio. And there are things that you've read about in the headlines about some of our adversaries who've gone away, disappeared, that's been made possible from Springfield, Ohio. So you may not know it, but many of those combat missions from those unmanned systems are actually flown out of Springfield, Ohio. Creates a unique set of challenges for us, specifically providing mental health, behavioral health support to those actual folks who do combat from their living room, essentially. They go to work, they fly combat missions, they go right back home to their families. So providing the support, chaplain support, mental health support, and that sort of thing is one of the challenges that we deal with in this modern environment where people can actually execute their missions from their desk. I have done this I'm in my 4th decade of service. I began as an aircraft mechanic way back in the day. I won't tell you the exact date because Amber will make me feel terrible. I went to officer candidate school shortly after while I was still in college, went to officer candidate school, went to flight school, flew attack helicopters for a number of years before going to administrative assignments, eventually serving as a chief of staff. I deployed to Kosovo, commanded a peacekeeping task force during a very, very volatile time there back in 2004, 2005. Keep in mind, NATO intervention was 1999, and there were still some angry folks about what NATO had done there in that part of the world. If you're familiar with the Balkans, you know that it's just probably one of the most challenging flashpoints when it comes to global security because of so many factors that I won't go into now. But I commanded a peacekeeping task force, came back from that, served as the chief of staff for the Guard, and then as the assistant adjutant general for Army for the Kasich administration, and then was appointed by Governor DeWine to this position. Fortunately, I get to serve with some of the greatest people I know in Governor DeWine's cabinet. I will tell you emphatically that Governor DeWine is truly one of the greatest leaders I've ever served, that I've ever known. He truly serves from a place of his personal values and his personal beliefs in what he believes in and his personal commitment. And when we talk about character, we sometimes struggle to define what character really is. Character, for me, is one of the most important aspects of trust. And Governor DeWine is a person of character because he knows his values. He knows what his personal baseline is, and he leads from that perspective. And he has seated a cabinet of people. He surrounded himself with people who are just like that. People like former Chancellor Gardner that I've had the opportunity to serve with, and Lydia Mahalik that you know very well. People truly who lead from values and from a place of commitment and compassion, and who are committed to living his charge to us, which is ensuring that every Ohioan has an opportunity to meet their full God-given potential. So we strive to do that every single day. So through the leadership of 16,000 service members, I wake up every morning to meet that charge. Not do we only meet our obligations to the citizens of Ohio, but how do we meet our obligations to global security and deployments? We have about 600 or 700 service members, airmen deployed right now. That varies. Just last year, we had 2,300 service members deployed at the peak of 2020 fiscal year 2024, so that would have been 23, 24. 2,300 folks deployed during a time when folks still believe that we are not engaged around the world, but we are absolutely fully engaged around the world. If you go to Washington, D.C. right now, the skies over our nation's capital, the missiles are manned, and the command and control center is actually controlled by Ohio National Guard members. So the most important assets in our nation are actually, the skies over that are actually secured by Ohio National Guard members today as we speak. So we have folks down on the southwest border. We have folks over in the CENTCOM area of responsibility, Kuwait, Afghanistan, and you name it. We say the sun never sets on the Ohio National Guard. And when we talk about leading during challenging times, these are truly challenging times for us because any time of transition is a challenging time. And really the last 25 years have been a time of transition because before September 11th, our National Guard was what we call a strategic reserve. Break glass in case of emergency. And we had outdated, cascaded equipment that came from the Army and the Air Force. And when September 11th happened, our nation realized that our Air Force and our Army were too small. So the National Guard became a very critical operational force to round out, to fill out the Army and the Air Force, and we've been deploying ever since. And we've been focused on counterinsurgency for over 20 years. And our challenge right now is that we're transitioning from counterinsurgency to what we call large-scale combat operations. getting ready for what we call the high-end fight. If we have to encounter China and its proxies, we know that that will be a very challenging, large-scale combat-type operation, something that we haven't done in our military in years, really since World War II. So transitioning from counterinsurgency, which is a totally different way of looking at the battlefield environment, to transitioning for large-scale combat operations, island hopping 3 chains, the tyranny of time and distance, and how do we prepare our service members for that, while maintaining our ability to respond, our primary responsibility, responding for the people of Ohio if the governor calls us. So we're a domestic response force also, so as you well know, when the governor calls, whether it's Indian Lake tornadoes or cybersecurity events, our guardsmen respond, no notice, same day, for the citizens of Ohio. So as we try to juggle all these priorities, and as we try to figure out how to modernize to meet the modern threat, all while maintaining flat budgets and doing so while we're trying to recruit and retain the most talented and committed service members that we can find in this environment. So those are some of our challenges. I'll stop there, and we can go forward with the discussion. And I encourage you, if there are any questions that you may have on your mind, not just about the Ohio National Guard, but any questions about national security or how national security, the geopolitical environment today affects national security. I'd be happy to talk about that, give you my opinion about it. And I will tell you, I'll put a disclaimer here that it is my opinion. I'm expressing my opinion, my thoughts. I'm not speaking on behalf of the United States Army, the Department of Defense. I'll tell you what's on my mind, and I'll do that. But I'll keep that disclaimer in place.
Thank you so much, General Harris, for giving us introductory remarks and a great overview of the Guard today. And you talked about once you were in the Guard, your path from there. But what initially interested you in joining the military and the Guard specifically?
You know, as a young high school kid, I was interested in sports, and that's what I was going to do. My dad was in the National Guard, but I had no interest in being in the National Guard because I saw the commitment that he'd made, the time that he'd spent doing it, and it really didn't appeal to me. And then as a senior, I realized I had to figure out how to pay for college. Suddenly, the National Guard looked awfully good to me, because the National Guard does have 100% scholarship program and a number of other incentives. So I joined the Guard. I was going to do my 6 years, get my college paid for, and be done with it, and I will tell you, I absolutely fell in love with it. I fell in love with every aspect of the Army. I loved basic training. I know that makes me a sick person. I loved the camaraderie. I loved the sense of connection, and I loved the sense of purpose. And as I said, my 6 years turned into 4 decades.
So that's good to know. We do have some students, both University of Findlay students here. We also have from Liberty Benton, we have the Supporting Our Soldiers students here with us today. Mrs. Allen has brought them. Students, do you want to give a wave here?
Thank you so much.
Yes. And this weekend, they are going to be spending time placing 1,000 flags on the front lawn of the school. And they're involved year-round in doing activities. So keep in mind the comments he just made, because perhaps one of you will see yourself in what he mentioned. So, and Mrs. Allen, thank you for bringing them today, and students for what you do. It's great. So, I'm sure through the years during your service time, you've probably noticed, are there some patterns that you see in the types of individuals who are attracted to the Guard and that you look for, you and your team look for?
I have found that there are generally 3 categories of people who join the Guard. The first category are what I described, folks who are looking for the benefits, right? The opportunity to go to college, to learn a skill, learn a trade. In fact, we recently modified our tuition program, our scholarship program, so that we'll now pay for certifications, licensures, and credentialing programs also for those young folks who want to do that. The second category are the folks who serve because it's a family tradition, and we see a good bit of that. It's declining because there's less and less family influence towards the military, but those folks that served because my father served, my grandfather served, my mom served, and those parents encouraged them to serve, and there's just a lineage of military service in that family. And the third category are those people who are just looking for an adventure. They see the ads, they talk to their peers, and those are the folks who come in and I want to go to Ranger School and I want to go to Special Forces, and we're seeing more and more of these like CrossFit young adventurous folks who are coming in challenging themselves just to truly find out what their true potential is.
So, can you share some insights as to someone or a couple people perhaps who, when you reflect back, have been mentors for you in your career? And tell us about how that occurred and their lessons to you.
You know, I have found that mentorship sort of happens organically. I've tried as a leader for years to establish official, formal mentorship programs, and some work and some don't, because there has to be a certain affinity between the mentor and the mentee. And for me, there were people like Greg Wade, who was a former adjutant general, who just took me under his wing. And I never went to him and said, "Would you be my mentor?" But we just had a great affinity, and he just gave me great advice. And I've found that mentors are great. When you have a vision for where you want to go or what you want to accomplish with your organization, generally you don't know what the track to get to that vision looks like. And that mentor is a person who can guide you towards that vision. So generally my mentorship relationships have been to me going to the person, not saying, "Will you be my mentor?" but saying, "Can you help me figure out how to get through this flight school track? Can you figure out what I need to do to get my application accepted?" And I will tell you, in very informal ways, mentors have been folks that I've just reached out to and said, that I've trusted, that I've reached out to and said, "I've got this issue and I don't know how to get through it." And we've never had the discussion about a formal mentor-mentee relationship. Randy Gardner is one of those people. And he may not recall it, but there were several times when I was dealing with a tough piece of legislation, and I'm not exaggerating. When I was dealing with a tough piece of legislation, I didn't know how to deal with it. I'd call him and say, here's what I'm looking at. What do you think I ought to do? And I think those are the best relationships when it comes to mentor-mentee. Someone that I trust, that I can reach out to and just ask them their honest opinion and know that they'll give me a trusted answer. And again, Chancellor Gardner was one of those people, and we never had a discussion about, "Will you be my mentor?" It was more, "I need help, and I trust your guidance."
That's great. Thank you. Many in our audience today don't have a military background. I would say the vast majority do not. Can you describe what's the difference between, say, the Army Reserves, the Navy Reserves, et cetera, and the National Guard? And how do you work together or not?
The biggest difference is the National Guard is better. Kidding.
I guess
for
I
all the
set that
reservists
one
out
up.
there. First of all, we have great cooperation and collaboration between all the reserve components because we recognize that everyone is essential to our nation accomplishing what our nation needs to do. But we all have the federal requirement. Right? We all support the geographic combatant commanders. Our job is to generate ready units to deploy for the warfight. That's every reserve component has that obligation. What makes the National Guard so unique is that we also have the mandate to respond here in the homeland for any domestic response, man-made, natural disaster, cyber attacks. So we prepare for that every day. And that requires an incredibly high level of readiness because those responses are what I call come-as-you-are responses. For our federal deployments, we will get year notification. We go through significant workups and validations and exercises to prepare for those deployments. For a tornado at Indian Lake, it's today. It's come as you are. When we get a phone call from Cleveland about a huge cyber attack, it's today. We'd better be ready, and it's come as you are. That means that the service member has to be ready all the time. It means that the family has to be ready all the time. It means the employer has to be ready all the time, because very often those mobilizations result in a phone call to the employer It goes something like this. Hey, I just got called by the National Guard. I won't be in on Monday, and I have no idea how long this is going to last. That requires an amazing commitment from employers. And it requires an amazingly high level of readiness by the entire universe around that service member to make sure they maintain a level of readiness. You know, we saw during COVID the number of soldiers, airmen, just individuals who went out and got a pet. Single folks who got a pet. And now, when we think about mobilizing on no notice, what's your plan for your pet? It sounds crazy, but if I call you and say, we're going to need you for the next 3 weeks, do you have a plan for your pet? That expensive tropical aquarium, what's your plan for that?
Yeah.
What's the plan for your business if you're a single business, if you're an individual business owner, sole business owner? What's your plan for your family if you're a single parent? These are all things that the National Guard member has to think about every single day and be ready for. And they've just done it over and over and over again over the last decade. It's just amazing how these young people maintain a high state of readiness. And by the way, this is a constitutional mandate. It's not just a good idea. Our National Guard is federally funded and given over to the control of the governors. Think about that. That's a construct that's unique. Nowhere, it doesn't exist anywhere else in the world. We have a federally funded militia that is then turned over to total control of the governors. My boss is the governor. There's not a single 4-star in Washington that I report to. I report to the governor. That makes people's heads spin, but it's a fourth balance of power in our nation, right? So that balance between the federal and the states, the federal government and the states, is an important balance of power in our nation.
Back on the pets, that is interesting. Hadn't thought about that. Do you, from the time somebody signs up as part of, say, their orientation, is that one of the, when you go through all the different things that you just mentioned, that's covered so that they have a really good idea that, yeah, I better go back and make sure that Fifi has not just a backup, but 2 backups, and again, for my business role, et cetera.
That's a great point and a very good question, because not only do we do it from the beginning, but we expect leaders who are responsible for the readiness for their soldiers. Military leadership is very different than any other form of leadership, because I like to say we have an obligation to pry into our service members' personal business sometimes, right? Because the level of readiness that we expect from our service members is so high. If that person has relationship challenges, that's going to erode their readiness. If they have financial challenges and can't keep their security clearance, that becomes a readiness issue for us. So our leaders become very, very engaged with the people they lead to make sure that all those personal matters are in effect. And quite frankly, we want leaders who love their service members enough to do that. Mm-hmm. They care about them enough to ensure that, I hate to say it this way, but if they have to pry into their personal lives, that they do it to make sure that that person maintains the level of wellness and readiness that we need from them.
So our theme this year is leading through challenging times. And you just mentioned that can be a challenge on, some of what you just addressed. But can you share with us, when you reflect on your 40-plus year career, share 1 or 2 big challenges that you faced and how you got through it, and anything maybe that in retrospect you might do differently. I'm sure you have no shortage, but if there are 1 or 2 that you can
well, the one that comes
address.
to mind immediately is COVID. We, of course, totally unexpected. And it required a response from us, from the National Guard, and a level of leadership from us that we really weren't prepared for. Well, at least we didn't think we were prepared for, because generally when we respond to a disaster, whether it's natural or man-made, it's generally a very acute response. We may be engaged for a few days or a few weeks, and then the National Guard is done. It goes back to work. The challenges we had with COVID were, number one, the number of unknowns. We just didn't know enough about the disease. Secondly, the onset, it was so sudden, overnight, the workforce in the food banks went to 0. The volunteers in the food banks went to 0, and there was demand right now. Mm-hmm. We had never done anything with food banks. That wasn't a mission we trained for. And again, it was all unknowns for us, but we took what we knew, I was often asked, why did you take an infantry brigade and put the infantry brigade in charge of food banks? These guys are riflemen. And I did that because we have an innate structure. We have a brigade commander. We could take battalions, those subordinate organizations, and overlay them over the state's regions. And we had trusted leadership relationships. Our soldiers knew each other. So when we went into the food banks, we didn't know much about running food banks, but we put our logisticians to work. We overlaid what we knew was our structure, and it worked. And at the same time that the demand on food banks had quadrupled at many of them, and the workforce went to zero, we had to meet that demand. And we had the same thing in nursing homes, and we put 500 people into prisons to backfill corrections officers, and we ran a mass vaccination site in Cleveland where we had to vaccinate 6,000 people a day, and testing stations, and none of these were missions that the National Guard had trained for. But we just took what we knew. We're good planners. We know how to plan for complex operations. We know how to conduct current operations while we're planning for future operations is what we do. So we took what we knew and overlaid it over the problem set and came up with some pretty good solutions. In fact, our mass vaccination site in Cleveland became the national model.
Huh. Well, clearly you need to be nimble too, right? What you just described, I think puts a couple stars right around being nimble. And that's my next question. What are some of the traits that you have noticed make for a really good soldier, and then for the leaders within the Guard? And by the way, can everyone hear okay? Okay, great.
Well, the number one trait, I think, is humility. And I don't say that lightly. Right? A leader, especially as you become a more senior leader, especially in the military ranks, you have to recognize, while sometimes it's expected that you know everything, you have to recognize that you don't. And you have to surround yourself with people and trust those people who really do know everything, because the aperture is just too large. There's just too much to know, too many problems to solve, too much to understand. So while many people believe that military leadership is very direct leadership, I tell you what to do and you do it, no questions asked, it's really quite the opposite. We lead through what we call mission command. This mission command mindset, well, I can give you purpose and I can give you intent, and you can execute, because that's empowering. If I tell you what I want you to do and why I want you to do it, and I trust you to do it, then you're empowered to go do what you need to do within moral and legal bounds to get it done. And as long as I am a leader who will underwrite any mistakes that you make along the way, then we have a trusting relationship. And so one of the most important characteristics, I think, of anybody who wears a uniform is the ability not only to build trust, to be trusted. And I don't say that lightly. A person who has character, competence, and is connected to the team is someone who can build that trust, and therefore I can, as a leader, trust you to accomplish the mission in absence of any guidance, and you can trust me to support you if in fact you make mistakes and fail. And I've had leaders along the way that have done it. I've got 1,000 examples of times when leaders have underwritten my mistakes. They've trusted me to do that, and they've underwritten my mistakes. But that starts with humility. That starts with a leader who says, I'm going to let this go. I'm going to take the risk at failing. And if we fail, I'll take responsibility for it.
So thanks. I'm sure you could think of other challenges, right? Probably every day something comes up, but those are some great traits for us to take with us today. So when there's a severe weather disaster, you referenced Indian Lake tornadoes, I'm thinking North Carolina, totally not expecting that hurricane to have an impact on North Carolina the way that it did. The National Guard's often mobilized. How are those decisions made? And please tell us about one of the most memorable natural disasters that you faced in Ohio with the Guard, and again, lessons learned, et cetera?
Well, the way it works is that it's Ohio's a home rule state. Local governments are strong governments, and generally the response starts there, and so it escalates. If in fact local government, if their capabilities are overwhelmed, then they will go to their emergency management agency, the county emergency management agency, and ask for help. And if the county can't help, then they go to the state emergency management agency, and over there they look at all the assets across the state and they decide what's the right toolkit to address this issue. So generally, it's when the capacity of the local first responders is exceeded that the National Guard is asked in. We never deploy ourselves. We never force ourselves on a municipality. We are always in support of the local government, whether it's civil disturbance, natural disaster, cyber response. We always go to support someone else at their request. Now, sometimes, simply because of our experiences, we may coach them heavily to help them understand that it's time to ask, because the later we get engaged, the more difficult it is for us to respond, especially in a case of like a civil disturbance or something, right? So we may be engaged coaching entities, sending liaisons out to the county emergency management agencies, sort of coaching them through the process of asking for us because they've not seen the disasters before, or it's very uncommon for them to see the disasters. So we spend a lot of time coaching, but again, we go in at the request of some local entity, and we are there to support them. I think that, and by the way, this crosses state lines because we have interstate agreements with other National Guard states. So when the hurricane states exceed their capacity, they will ask for other states to respond. That's how we end up with over 60 people deployed down south after Helene and Milton. But I think the most memorable for me was Rita and Katrina. Because we sent 1,500 people in response to Hurricane Rita to another state. And the devastation was just amazing. And right on the heels of that, Hurricane Rita came through, and we sent another 1,500 people there for that. And that was unplanned. And again, these are 3,000 people now who weren't even planning to go anywhere because the disaster wasn't in Ohio. We plucked them out of their lives and sent them there. And the devastation was just overwhelming in that place. Similarly, with civil disturbance, that we saw in Washington as we prepared for the inauguration at the last election, we put 26,000 people, not just Ohio, but the National Guard put 26,000 people in the National Capital Region. Again, that was a massive response. That's like 2 divisions worth of soldiers, and we had them there within a week. But that was pretty memorable because it was very odd seeing our nation's capital militarized. And of course, every response is political. Let there be no doubt about it. Every response, even the most local response, whether it's East Palestine, which is another very memorable disaster, we were there, and that just watching that devastation. But let there be no doubt that there's always a little bit of wrangling between who's the incident commander, and when we send those resources in, we make sure that we're working for that local fire chief in East Palestine. You're in charge, chief. We may have the resources, we may have the capacity, we may have the technical capability, but it's still your response, chief. And we insist upon that.
So do you touch base with them if you are there at the invitation of the local government or coordinating with them? Do you touch base periodically with the local person there? Or how do you find out they need more, this is working, this isn't working, et cetera?
Well, that works 2 ways. We do put a liaison generally in that county office, so we always know what's happening, so that the commander on the ground can focus on commanding and responding, and the liaison coordinates with the county or the local entity for what's happening. And also through our partner agencies, right? The Department of East Palestine's a great example. Department of Public Safety, EPA, these are all agencies that were involved in that response. So we ran kind of a small command center. So we had good situational awareness all the time over what was happening, and we made sure that we had constant liaison with the incident. In fact, we were co-located with the incident commander, in that case, the local fire chief.
Yeah. How do you safeguard mental health for your troops and their families?
That's a very good question, because we are seeing a significant increase in and behavioral health, mental health issues for our service members, higher cases of anxiety. Moreover, the young folks that we're trying to assess, the young folks that we're trying to recruit for the military, more and more cases, just a higher preponderance of cases of anxiety, previous anxiety, depression. And we want to open the door and create opportunities for these young people to serve, and that's becoming more difficult. So in the Ohio National Guard, we've actually created an entire directorate. I've put a colonel in charge of a directorate for what we call resiliency, where I have on my staff behavioral health providers, and I have prevention specialists who are focused on preventing corrosive behaviors in our ranks. So we've built this team of people who are focused on preventing sexual violence and suicides and alcohol abuse and OVIs, dedicated to preventing that, not just responding to it, but reducing those corrosives in our ranks and focusing on not only resilience for our service members, but also for their families, also because we think that's important. For me personally, I think it starts with self-awareness. You've got to know what those stressors are and when they're manifesting themselves in your life. And I can't tell you that I haven't talked to folks on my staff sometimes when the stress level gets up and I see those indicators. And that's part of training for that, is knowing what the indicators are in your own life, what the triggers are in your own life when you're getting to your limits, right? And how to deal with those. So I've exercised that myself, and I've gone to talk to people on my own staff when the needle's getting high, and for me, it's stupid things like I can start to manifest a lot of anger. A lot of anger starts to manifest itself. I know that's the trigger for me because I've worked with our folks, and so we pay a lot of attention to this in the military because it's very important that not only we retain the great folks that we have, but make sure that we keep them at the highest level of performance that we can possibly keep them at. That's our obligation to them. Our commitment from Governor DeWine is making sure every Ohioan meets their full God-given potential. So it's not just enough to come into our ranks, but we want them to be better people as a result of it. And focusing on mental health, behavioral health, again, reducing those corrosives in their life is a very important part of that.
Great. We're going to open this in just a moment for questions, so be thinking of questions. And Doreen has a microphone. Great. So my last question for you before we open it up is, what keeps you up at night?
Truly what keeps me up at night right now is China. And I don't exaggerate about that. I'm concerned about China and our ability to prepare for great power competition. As I see the alliances building between North Korea and Russia and China, and our obligation to make sure our young men and women are prepared for that, if in fact the occasion occurs. Xi Jinping has told his forces, be prepared to take Taiwan by force if necessary by 2027, and they're on a glide slope to do that. And it's our responsibility to make sure that our responsibility first and foremost is to ensure that we're strong enough to deter that. The greatest deterrent is going to come through strength and ensure that we modernize and that we have the capacity so that Xi Jinping knows that if he tries it, the cost will be too high. That's our first obligation. And secondly, if in fact we don't achieve that, to ensure that our young men and women are ready for that. But deterrence through strength is very real. We have more intelligence on each other than we possibly need. They know our capabilities and our strength, and our responsibility is to remain strong so that we can deter any activity towards Taiwan from China. That's what keeps me up at night.
Well, thank you. So we'll begin taking questions, and then we'll wrap up. Dr. Sears.
Thank you, General Harris, for your comments and remarks. I have a question which some may perceive as provocative. I don't intend to be provocative. I sincerely am interested in your answer. President Trump has defined the border crisis as a national security issue and has mentioned the possibility of sending military units, including National Guard units, to deal with that issue. Speculation is that most of those National Guard units would come from states with Republican governors. do you anticipate that Ohio National Guard members will be sent to deal with that issue?
Great question. I'll leave the political part of the answer to the politicians, of course, because my job is to be apolitical, but I will tell you that there are Ohio National Guards on the southwest border right now. There are two missions going on the southwest border. The first mission is Operation Lone Star, which is Governor Abbott's mission, which he's using state dollars with his state's National Guard, and other states are augmenting him with state dollars supporting the southwest border. As I said, 4,000. And that mission set is the one that you usually see in the news. They're in full gear, they're driving around in military vehicles, and they're doing almost law enforcement type operations there on the southwest border. The other mission is a federal mission, which is where our folks are federalized. Our service members are called to federal duty. They go through the full workup, and they deploy for a year to the southwest border. That's what your Ohio National Guard soldiers are doing. We do that in support of Customs and Border Protection. They're doing primarily camera operations, observation missions, surveillance missions, but they're not doing hands-on missions with the migrants. We leave that to Customs and Border Protection. And I anticipate that if there is future support to the southwest border from Ohio, it'll be more of that second mission that I told you, where we go down and support the law enforcement agents. It's concerning. It's a little bit concerning, and you should be concerned when uniformed folks start doing law enforcement type missions. Posse Comitatus prevents us from doing that. It takes our country to a bad place when essentially martial law is imposed. So it's something that we avoid. I think supporting Customs and Border Protection, having law enforcement doing law enforcement, we'll maintain their vehicles, we'll watch cameras for them, we'll do all those sorts of things, but I think it's better that we not be hands-on with the migrants. I think that's an operation. There are enough law enforcement in this country to do that. I think that the military provides economy of force operations to free up the law enforcement officers to do the law enforcement, so we do all those support type things that we can help support them in that. But I do anticipate that there will be additional Ohio National Guardsmen deployed, but it'll be in support of Customs and Border Protection. Did that answer your question?
Thank you.
Thank you.
Next question. Who has a question? Right here.
Thank you. So leadership is one of the most valuable traits, I think, whether it's at home, raising my 3 daughters, or professionally at work. Is there a saying that the Ohio National Guard goes by, or something you live your life by that you could share with us?
Wow. I don't know if there's a saying. I don't know if it's a saying, but I think that the most important part of leadership is having a solid foundation of values from which you lead. Because there's too much in our society right now that's kind of situational. And I think that leaders sometimes find themselves in tough spots making decisions because the moral compass, that values compass isn't true north. So having a solid foundation from which you make decisions, from which you lead your personal life, for me, it's my faith. And there's a lot of leadership principles in the Bible. I know that's different for other folks. I follow the teachings of Jesus. Other people have different beliefs, but you have to have some foundational value system that you're anchored in. You have to, otherwise every decision becomes a hard decision. And more importantly, especially when in our ranks, when it comes to things like discipline, when it comes to things like second chances for soldiers, just every decision you have to make becomes a difficult decision if you don't have some sort of value system that you're anchored to that helps you to do that. So not a model, not a saying, but if there was anything I could encourage every leader to do is know who you are and know what your value set is, and start with that. Start with that.
Great, thank you. One more question.
This one over here.
Good morning, and thank you for your leadership and your service. You mentioned cybersecurity and your cyber force. It's probably something that we're not very familiar with within your ranks. Can you describe a little bit more about that unit and what it does?
Well, we have several. Our Army National Guard has several cyber units, and they deploy every couple of years. They go up to U.S. Cybercom, and it's one of the few organizations that can do offensive operations. It's illegal for anyone else to do offensive cyber operations. So they actually go out there into the systems and they hunt forward. They hunt forward, and they're getting into the bad guy systems, doing to them or preventing them from doing what they do to us. The second major unit that we have is, I mentioned, the cybersecurity wing out of Mansfield, the air base that's converting right now. And their job will be to do cyber-enabled air superiority. So when the combatant commander, whether it's INDOPACOM or EUCOM or AFRICOM, when those commanders have a thorny issue they're dealing with, particularly in INDOPACOM, when we're trying to get air power through those aerial denial systems. They've got very complex aerial denial anti-access systems. If we have to fight our way into INDOPACOM, that commander will call that unit and say, I've got this issue and I need a solution. They've got coders who will actually write the code that will use cyber to defeat, or at least to create effects for some temporary period to allow our air power to do what it needs to do. And that's really what it's about. It's about converging effects for a short period. The days of massing large forces and fighting force on force are just about done. The ability to detect so far away to keep your adversary under constant observation. So creating converging effects for some short period so that we can get air power in, create their effects, and get back out. Those are the sorts of things that we'll do for Mansfield. And last but not least, we have a cyber reserve, which is organized under the Adjutant General, under my agency, but it's about 180 right now, civilian cyber professionals who volunteer to be a part of the cyber reserve. And when we have a crisis in Ohio, we call them and put them in a paid status, put them in a semi-military status, and they go to work responding to cyber threats all over the state for us. And they're fantastic because they bring all the learning and all the knowledge from their civilian workplace. So whether they work for Chase Bank or Northrop Grumman, they've seen a lot. So they bring niche type capabilities to us so that when we put together a cyber response, we not only put together some really experienced military folks, but we can bring those skills from the civilian sector. And we're seeing more and more every day, not only ransomware attacks, but just intrusions into systems that would surprise you that we find, and many of them are not only state-sponsored, but some are actually state actors that are affecting our systems.
Fascinating. And that's something, knowing we have faculty and some students here, keep that cybersecurity aspect in mind. The fact that you initially have volunteers and then you put them on pay status, that's very interesting. So we know General Harris has a very important meeting coming up, so we're going to need to wrap this so he can get to that meeting. But let's all please thank him for giving this time. We're honored that you chose to spend a Friday morning with us, and we are, of course, just on the eve of Veterans Day coming up on Monday. So any of our veterans or active duty who are here with us today, could you please stand and be recognized and thanked for your service? Thank you very, very much. Ken, I'm going to turn this back to you. I do know, I saw Leanne Ireland. We do have the campus, the alumni veterans program coming up Monday at 5 p.m., and Ken can probably wrap on that.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Dr. Latta. We will have a celebratory service this coming Monday over at our CBSL, open to everyone. It's always a great time to recognize the service of our students who have either currently serving, have served, or have passed, but are on our Veterans Wall. And so we'll do a nice recognition there, and that ends with reading the names of the over 700 individuals who have served that have been alumni from this institution. So. I would like to also remind everybody that we will have another Fridays at Findlay coming up on December 13th. Our speaker will be Jeff Saylor, who is the CEO of the Toledo Zoo. And he'll be coming talking a little bit about the business of running a zoo and also some of the great outreaches that the Toledo does across the nation. So, and I guess to end this, let me ask you a question. Do you hear about the tree that had to take a break in autumn? Yeah, it was on paid leave. So thank you. Good morning. Go have a great day.